All right, welcome y'all. Dustin Jones here with Stronger Life Fitness. Today we are going to talk about how to get strong and resilient wrists. This is a topic that can be common for folks when they start to do exercise. They start to put their hands on the ground and do push-ups and things in quadruped or on their hands and knees. They start to have some aches, some pains, or we go to lifting things like a kettlebell or a dumbbell or a barbell that they start to have some wrist issues. So we're going to talk about some things that you want to think about that you can do to make sure your wrist stays strong and resilient whenever you start to really increase your activity levels. This is something that I've experienced personally, especially starting to lift heavier and heavier weight, relatively heavy weights, that I had some wrist issues and was able to work through it. So hopefully you can get some ideas here. So we're going to break this down into two parts. We're going to talk about the mobility piece to make sure you have mobile wrists, and then talk about the strength piece to really build up the capacity of those wrists. All right, so the first thing when we talk about mobility is you really want to emphasize a good warm-up whenever you are going to lift things with your upper extremities or you're doing weight-bearing activities. Especially for people that know they have some cranky wrists, they may have some issues, you may want to really emphasize a really good warm-up. Get things nice and loose before you start to jump into that activity. So some different things that we can do to warm up the wrists. The first one is a very easy one that you can do, and I encourage you to do this right now. Take your hands together like this, and you're just rolling your wrists like so. You'll probably hear some pops at first, and that's perfectly fine, but you're basically trying to take the back of your hand straight forward and then flipping it to the other side. All right, this can get some good motion through the wrist, just kind of working things out, getting some range of motion there. And then as that's kind of warming up and that's feeling a little better, then we can leverage more weight or pressure to really stretch and mobilize the wrists some more. And so we'll do something in quadrupeds on your hands and knees. You could also do this from an elevated surface like a table or a chair, but we'll do it rocking here on our hands and knees. And you can take your hands and put them pretty close to your knees, and you'll see as I shift my weight forward, I'm going into what we would call wrist extension. All right, so this is wrist extension and this is flexion. Extension, flexion. Extension for a lot of people can be bothersome. And so you can leverage your own body weight and shift your weight forward, and what I'm doing is I'm going to the point of kind of discomfort and coming right off of it. So really kind of flirting with that line and going back and forth, and what you'll feel is that you'll be able to go a little bit further each time, that you'll be able to get a little more mobility and it won't be as bothersome. So rocking back and forth. You can also do this with your fingers pointed towards your knees, and instead of shifting my weight forward, I'm going to focus on shifting my weight back, and I'm really trying to keep the palm of my hand down on the ground. And what you'll notice with this one is that it's targeting your wrist, but you're also stretching a whole lot of these muscles throughout your forearm. And same thing, rocking to that point of discomfort and then coming off. You could also put your hands together like this and go side to side. It's also a great one to do. And these are all focused on wrist extension. That's going to be a big one for a lot of folks. You can also do the same thing for wrist flexion. You can put the back of your hands down on the mat. This is a little more uncomfortable, if you will, so you'll be careful in terms of how far you go, but just try and keep the back of your hands flat on the ground, and you're shifting your weight back and forth. You can go side to side. I could do this as well and then come back, and you really feel this one. Or I could do this one as well and then come forward. So just like with the wrist extension but flexion, your back of your hand is on the ground. So those can be helpful, and oftentimes that can really loosen things up to where you can tolerate a lot more. But let's look at what we can do if we leverage something like a band to provide a little bit of a stretch, or what we would call distraction. So these are they call them Rogue power bands. You could use TheraBand. You could use some type of strap, whatever strap that you can use to where you can wrap it around the wrist. It's going to do the trick. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take this band and put it right around the crease of my wrist, and I'm going to take my hand and hold it like this. And what I'm going to do is just back up, and I'm just basically letting this elongate myself, and I'm getting a pull or traction that's stretching my wrist. It's also stretching my elbow and my shoulder a little bit as well. You can do a whole lot of things in this position too, to where you could step back and make it a hip flexor stretch, really work the shoulders. But in terms of the wrist, all you really need to do is kind of come back, and you can kind of just play around with that tension. And that can give some distraction that can be pretty helpful for some folks. Another thing that you can do with the band is to do banded wrist extension, all right? So if wrist extension is a big issue, which for many people it is, you take the band, put it right here on your wrist, and you walk your hand forward to where that band is trying to pull your forearm back. All right, so it's stabilized right there, and then I'm keeping my palm down on the ground, and I'm shifting my weight forward. Now what you may notice is that with adding this traction here where it's pulling your forearm back, you're able to go a little bit more forward. You have a little bit more wrist extension. So you're able to get more of a mobilization, and sometimes that can really help with discomfort. And it's the same principle. I'm going forward to that point of discomfort and then coming off. The big one with this is you want to make sure that it's stabilized to a solid surface, so maybe a heavy dining room chair could be helpful, something that's low, because you want the force low, pulling it straight back. Okay, so that's the mobility piece. That should give you some good ideas to really make them more mobile, but we don't want to leave it there. We want to follow that up by making the wrists stronger. We want them to be able to handle different positions and different weights. So the first thing that you probably want to do is just work on things on your hands and knees. Quadruped is what we would call that position. So you can do things like bear crawls. All right, you can do things like bird dogs. You can do things like push-ups. And just to work on being able to handle more and more weight through your wrists. Now, if you are still struggling with your hands on the ground and the mobilizations aren't working, we can also think about ways we can modify. And what you can do is elevate your palms. And what that does is it doesn't allow you to go through that full range of motion of that wrist extension. And so it can be a little crutch, if you will, that can allow you to do some of these weight-bearing movements with less pain. So I'm using plates. Here you can use something like small books, whatever it is that you can put on your palms. Let me move this back. If you look at the position of this wrist here, as I go down, it doesn't go into as much extension as if my hand's flat right here. All right, and that can be helpful for some folks. Also weights, so a good old kettlebell, loaded carries can be great. Whether you're using a kettlebell, a dumbbell, a trap bar is another thing that you can think about. Even the squeezy grip strengtheners can be helpful for that as well. These are things you want to be progressive with and really build up based on your tolerance. Okay, so those are ideas for mobility, ideas for strengthening the wrist. Now let's talk about some different pieces of equipment that can help you if you're just not making any progress. So the first one is a wrist strap or wrist wrap. You can search weightlifting wrist wraps, and this will come up. And all this does is basically apply compression to your wrist. So they typically have a thumb loop like so, and you just wrap this around as tight as you want based on your comfort, and then based on your circulation to make sure that you still have circulation going to your fingers. And as I wrap this around and Velcro this on, my wrist is rock solid here. And so that can allow me to pick up something like this kettlebell and probably tolerate it a good bit more. And you can also do things in weight bearing as well. You just got to be careful of where you wrap this to make sure it's probably below that crease. But something as simple as these wrist wraps can be very helpful. You can get them for about $12, $13 on Amazon. Very useful. Then we have these. All right, so these are called weightlifting straps, and these can basically assist your wrist in being able to handle weight. And so what you do here is you can use this on a barbell, kettlebell, whatever has a handle, and you put your hand through the strap like this, take that strap, and you basically pull it through. And so my hand is on the strap right here, and then I can grip that kettlebell. And what this is basically doing is providing a little bit more support if my grip is not able to handle this weight. And so what you'll notice is, especially with something like the deadlift where we pull a barbell off the ground, people will be able to lift heavier with the assistance of a wrist strap like this. So wrist straps, and then these wrist wraps are going to be helpful as well. So to recap, mobility, emphasize the warm-up before you start to do your exercises. There's some stretches you can do in quadruped. There's some things you can do with a nice stretchy band, whether it's the wrist distraction or the banded extension down here. And then you want to build up that load with some things in quadruped, push-ups, things like that, leveraging weights. And if you're not really making any progress, then spend $12, $13 on getting these weightlifting straps or the wrist wraps. All right, so that's it for strong and resilient wrists. Hopefully you got some ideas. If you still have questions regarding how to improve your wrist mobility as well as your strength, just go to StrongerLifeHQ.com, go to the contact page, and we'd love to help you out in any way we can.